welcome to Corinne's Picks. I'm your host, Corinne Basabe. Today we have with us Don Perlis. He is a renowned painter. His work has been in museums and private collections all over the world. His museum has been seen at the Whitney Museum, the Brooklyn Museum, the Brooklyn Museum, the National Museum of Poland. He's been in Art News, Art in America, Art Forum. So glad that you could make it back to Corinne's Picks.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Sure.
This is a part 2 of a series that we're doing on artificial intelligence and the art that's created by artificial intelligence. And, you know, Don's career has been mainly about documenting trends and social issues that are happening in the country. And you've had some very strong opinions on AI, so I really wanted to continue exploring that issue, especially when it comes to, you know, your reactions to big events. For example, we know that the famous art critic, Charlie Finch, recently passed away, right?
Yes.
And there's 2 ways of capturing that, right?
Yeah.
You can go inside and paint it yourself.
Yeah.
And you can also just generate it in AI, right? So can you tell us a little bit about this whole issue of AI and reacting to the world?
As far as I know, so far, journalists and newspapers have not used machine-made images except for cameras, you know, in terms of documenting news events. But it's maybe the first time anybody thought of it was just when you just said it, because or maybe it has been thought of and rejected, but in the past, way before there was media, there were newspapers, of course, but they didn't have photography in the really early days, and they had artists draw. Like Winslow Homer, for instance, was he was an illustrator during the Civil War in the United States, and England has had cartoonists and artists working for their newspapers, and so did France. But they didn't really start using photography until they had the means to reproduce it. So now AI has joined, you know, the possibilities of what they might be able to do. I forgot your question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, you know,
yeah.
It's really interesting because, you know, you're a painter, I'm a painter, right?
Yeah.
And I absolutely love AI. I mean, I welcome it as an art form. It's not something that I would want to do a lot, but I like the results.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily get too much into it. I like to paint. I like the action of painting.
Yeah.
But I like those images.
Yeah.
You know, people are concerned because graphic designers, illustrators that are used for book covers, magazine covers, could be out of a job with AI. But to me, you know, the challenge should be making your work as interesting as AI.
Yeah, well, if I saw something that interesting in AI, I would probably feel like that, but so far I haven't. I mean, I was watching some television last night, and they had some animated thing, I think it was on Netflix, just to kill some time. And it was I thought what I was looking at was actually real actors until the camera moved around a little bit, and I could see their bodies, and I could see and really what it was a rip-off of that that new film. I mean, the way they make the figures elongated, you know, with the ears. With the water world? It's a huge film.
Oh, Avatar.
Yeah, Avatar. It was kind
yeah.
of the figures, the human figures in the thing were like a little bit of a rip. They were influenced by they were elongated and stretched out, and they moved like that. And you know, and they didn't replace actors. They just looked. It just looked like a little weird. But the thing about AI, when I look at photographs, they're a little creepy to me because they look like photographs of people, but they don't really look like photographs of people. They look stiller and more and even more high def.
Well, you know, before we get too far into like a personal conversation, maybe the audience needs to see. I want to show
Sure.
Don's work, And let me give you a little context with the images you're going to see. It's an image of Charlie Finch, who recently passed. Can you tell us a little bit about Charlie and the images you created?
Well, Charlie Finch was a very well-known art critic, and I first encountered him way back in the late 80s when the filmmaking crew contacted him and asked him to make some comments on this film they were making about my work. And so young Charlie and then young Don, like me, met each other. But he was about 12 years younger than me, actually. He did a great, he was very enthusiastic about my work, happily, because I didn't know him at the time. And he gave a really nice narration on that film, which is on YouTube, by the way. It's called New York Painter. And I first met him then. And then he had covered my work in this newspaper he had out in California, somewhat. Caligula,
okay.
yeah, somewhat. And, you know, and he did a couple of times on, I think, ArtNet. I think he was on computers with that when I had some shows. But I didn't have a lot to do with him socially. And then we reconnected about 2016. He told me he had a worldwide group of people that he was associated with, artists, writers, filmmakers, intellectuals all over the world. And he asked me if I would join it. And I said, it sounds really exciting. And we became closer friends than we ever were before. And you know, he was a brilliant intellectual, and but a very, very difficult person. And as a critic, he had alienated or pissed off, I could say, you know, a lot of his colleagues in the art critical world. And he was kind of a pariah in New York to some of them. At the same time, when he died, they gave him due respect, and you know, he had a half a page in the New York Times, and he had comments on Instagram from people who really thoroughly despised him. You know, nice. I mean, really nice, like things they said about him.
But you know, you're saying that he had a lot of people who he upset, but he had equally as many people who adored Charlie, and for for the same reasons they disliked him. The other fans of him loved him for the same behavior. He
was outrageous, and he'd say whatever came to his mind first, and he was not influenced, I don't believe, by anything commercial. And he was a very well-educated person, went to the best schools in the country, and his opinions were very weighty and very, very well thought, and he was a wonderful writer too. So. And there were people who honored him and loved him, and it's true. And I became one of them.
Exactly.
I mean, in spite of the shortcomings of being friends with him, which, because he could be really difficult, lose his temper and fly off the handle and even be insulting. But for the most part, he was extremely supportive of people whose work he liked. And he'd go to the trenches for people whose work he liked.
So, you know, we have 5 minutes to a break. Can we see that first image? I just want to see how you... you know, a human painter with human hands immortalized Charlie. This is your studio, right?
That's a photograph of my studio wall with a painting that's actually in progress, so that you can't tell from this.
Okay, can we have the next photo, please?
Yeah, and this is a little bit of more of a close-up, but yeah, the lower part of the painting is still going to get more work, but it's all there in underpainting. And
why is he?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we might as well be truthful in terms of why this composition, why in this fashion with him upside down and the chair. Can you tell us a little bit more about the context of this painting?
Well, Charlie was a suicide who killed himself by leaping out a window, and you know, those who were close to him were trying to prevent it, like very with a lot of difficulty, and not much cooperation from people who could have helped. And there were about 5 or 6 of us in New York. I was one of them, and then several people outside New York. And Charlie had he was incredibly ill with cancer and heart disease. and the last part of his life was he was unable to really take care of himself, and it was tragic that a brilliant mind like that could be in a situation like that. And he lived in an apartment for many, many years on the Lower East Side, and you know, his friends would come over, they would bring him food and drink, and he was on a, you know, he was on a catheter, I mean, for his urine, and he was in very, very in pain most of the time, and he really desperately needed help, and we tried like crazy, and then he actually tried to commit suicide at one point and went up to his roof and then threatened to do it, and then I think he fell down from the first floor. I think. I mean, he didn't get hurt, which is a miracle. And
But why
yeah.
the chair in the image? Why did you put a chair?
Because, well, that chair was the one that was near his bed, and
Okay.
what I did is when I made the painting, I had to conceive of Charlie and who he was, and it's really an interpretation of a man and his entire life falling out the window, jumping out, you know, in other words, he jumped out the window, but he took his entire life with him, and his apartment and his room were filled with mementos of his whole life, his critical career, things that he cherished, photographs that he cherished, artworks that he cherished, objects that he cherished, and the tragedy of it all went to nothing. It all got smashed when he did, and yeah.
Yeah, we have about 2 minutes till break, but you know, it was very disturbing to me because there are, you know, he absolutely needed help, but New York is a city where there's so many social services, there's a visiting nurse service, there's aides that could have been got, there's so much help for people who have in psychological crisis, who have in medical crisis,
Yeah.
who are elderly.
Yeah.
You know, so it really was an absolute loss, an absolute tragedy.
Yeah, because well, we know, you and I and other people tried to help him and get help for him, and we could only do it with permission from certain people that we didn't get, and I don't know. I don't like to use the word homicide, but I think.
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
the thing about that painting is, I think the painting is like your other work,
yeah.
like your other work series. You always document these big moments in the country. Whether it's you did the George Floyd, you did Zadok Williams, you did Bernard Goetz, you did Eleanor Bumpurs,
Yeah.
and now you've done Charlie Finch.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of things I do besides those, those particular kinds of paintings. I just wanted to clear that up.
You did the opera series.
I do opera series. I do landscapes, still lifes, portraits. I mean, I have a pretty kind of very diversified background.
We're going to go to break, and then we're going to come back and talk about AI.
Yeah.
And how that couldn't have been Charlie's experience could not have been captured by AI, perhaps.
Well,
okay.
Yeah.
So let's dive into that when we come back. We're going to a brief commercial break.
Yeah.
Man, it's lonely. Going through life lonely.
There is the therapeutic aspect of music.
Even though we didn't grow up together, he's my favorite brother.
Hey, sis.
I'm the baby of the family, and he's the gentle giant.
What you know about Poor Georgia?
Man, please, that's a classic.
You know when they say people are a rare breed? Yeah, he's that.
I'm sorry, I'll be back in a few hours.
Don't worry, Shug. You know I'm for you.
I know.
Go get the football.
That was my favorite memory. He was always for ya. This is a true story of me, Bridget Floyd, and this guy, George Perry Floyd Jr., my big brother.
Feel the beat of nature at a park or forest near you. Find a forest and music inspired by nature at discovertheforest.org.
Welcome back to Corinne's Picks. I'm your host, Corinne Basabe. We have with us the remarkable Dawn Perlis, a master painter. And we've been continuing a conversation on AI, and we were using the death and the I guess, depiction of Charlie Finch to really compare the experience of capturing that experience and the experience of recreating it in AI. Can I see the third image? I just wanted Dawn to see how Charlie Finch was captured in AI, the third image. This is an image by Xavier Basabe. He created this based on a real image of him, Charlie Finch, in an art gallery. The artist Xavier couldn't be here today because he was ill, but you know, compare your image of Charlie and that whole experience of his death with this image in AI.
Well, this shows in a way, a lighter side of Charlie. You know, he's a little mad. I mean, that expression in his eye, it's quite amusing, and he looks quite younger and more handsome. On the way over, I was actually thinking of what if Javier had made an image of Charlie's suicide and what it would look like.
Oh, God.
And I know that part of the process of doing an AI is talking to the computer. So you say, what do you say, a 70-year-old man,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
falling out the window with a bathrobe,
Exactly. That's
surrounded
exactly.
by chairs. It would be interesting to see what the computer came up.
Actually, that is a very interesting.
But you know,
interesting.
not that it's funny, but I mean, it would be interesting to see what it came up with. But when I did the painting of Charlie, I mean, I did it for my, you know, I had a very deep connection to this guy, and we were really close friends, and he really helped me a lot. So I was feeling it, you know, and I wanted to show what I was feeling. So.
And also the painting.
You know,
I don't know if you'll take this. I don't know if you like my comment, but the painting is kind of disturbing. But to me, the death was very disturbing.
Oh, me too.
You know, it was in the New York Post, and he was lying on the side. You know, I couldn't even think straight when I saw that image on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And I actually wanted to talk about that, to use as a model for AI, because I feel that death had weight. His name, who he was, had weight, and I wanted to give it some weight, rather than just another thing that happens in New York. And I feel a loss because I don't get to know what his comments about AI was, what his opinions would have been about AI.
Well, in knowing Charlie, I mean, Charlie had a very much wider idea of what encompasses art. So, and you know, Charlie always would say that he's making art out of his life. So when he did something that involved people, and the fact that he documented it, his expression about himself and about what he was doing was that he was making art. So my feeling about Charlie is that he had a very open mind, and that I don't think he would pass a judgment on a media, but I think he would pass a judgment on a work.
But I also know he didn't like gimmicks. He didn't like, you know, he didn't like BS. He knew somebody who he didn't like people
Yeah.
use, proclaiming to be artists, but really just being a hustler.
Yeah.
I mean, some things are conceptual arts, and some things are a hustle.
Well, I remember when photography wasn't considered an art. It was Gene Thornton was a friend of mine who was the photography writer he was the main photography writer at the Sunday Times years ago, and hope he's well. I don't even know if he's still around, but really nice man. And then when performance art came in, there was a lot of criticism amongst painters about performance art, and now it's all been accepted by the general art market, and I don't remember, or I actually don't even know what Charlie's idea about these things were at the beginning. But in knowing him, I would think that his feeling about it would be more expansive than mine, for instance, because I mean I'm a painter, and I'm only really interested in painting in terms of because it takes so much energy to do it that I have to expend that energy in order to be able to do it. So
Yeah, I really like. I like the art of painting. It's like channeling something, but I really love. I really love AI. I mean,
make some. Yeah.
I feel that artists sometimes are a little bit too safe and do the same kinds of images over and over again. And I think that AI has no boundaries. It has no inhibitions. It takes all the information from the internet. I've just seen fabulous images that kind of help me to even re-envision who I am as a older woman. I love the images of older people, seniors with fabulous clothes and bright colors. I love it. Can we see some more images of AI? I guess image number 4. So what are your comments about this? Is Xavier Basabe as well?
Yeah. Well, this looks more like a painting that was executed with the aid of a photograph. For a lot of reasons. And it's a very attractive illustration. I mean, I would say.
And look at the hands. Remember in the last show, I made a comment about AI had not perfected it, so that they always have too many hands. That supposedly has been corrected recently. So AI now has 5. The images now have 5 fingers instead of like a centipede.
So it's an improvement. And just to be the devil's advocate for just to reply to what you said, I mean, most of the things that AI produces comes from previous digital photographs and from photography. I mean, the actual image.
Well, I think that one of the
images
arguments against it that there's some artists who are suing because they can see elements of their actual work, which is their intellectual property, in some of these recreations. Because, like I said, it scans a database of all the things that have ever been created.
So it'll take art too.
And kind of steals your idea. Picasso might have come up with a certain style that is identifiably Picasso or Basquiat. And I could say, okay, I want this flower and vase in the style of Basquiat, and the computer will do it in the style of Basquiat. Now, he might have gone through something to create that style, and now I could have it instantly.
Yeah, at least what the machine thinks.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I can understand your excitement because you don't really know what it's going to produce, and there's always a certain amount of excitement.
Well, I like the idea of reaching a little further, taking a risk. I like science fiction. I like horror. I like things that are on the edge. I want to feel something. I just don't want to see the same thing over and over. I want something to be really interesting and challenging.
Well, I can appreciate and understand that, even if I don't feel like that my own self. But because for me, it's a little too much technology for intervening on what I can do with my hands and my brain. So,
it can never replace me as a painter in terms of, I paint for myself, so it's not satisfying to just look at AI. I like it on social media, but however, I'm not that vested in actually getting the computer and doing it. I want to paint. I want to use my hands and paint. Let's look at one more image, and then we think we have about 3 minutes left.
Oh yeah,
I
very
think
elegant. Yeah.
I think this is a Taína woman, a modern Taína woman that Xavier Basabe did. He's of Afro-Puerto Rican descent. What do you think about this one? I'm not sure what words he put in to get her.
It's very elegant. I mean, I think altogether. You know, I had a little problem with the braid on the other side of her, because you know, it sometimes happens to me. I remember the last time I was looking at AI, I misunderstood it visually. And the way I read this particular image is that the light blue behind her head on the lower part of her light braid, there's a braid being thrown out by her head on the other side that is meeting the door.
Right, right.
So what I read when I looked at this was that her shoulder went up to the braid because she's wearing a blue cloak as well. So it took me a while to adjust my eyes to realize that that what was in between her braid and the shoulder is air. And then the other thing that is problematic, or would be problematic in a painting, is that when you put two forms that knock against each other, they're going to be fighting for the same space unless you put one form in front of another. So in this case, I don't think it's possible to put the door in front of her unless she's painted on the wall.
Actually, I didn't even think of that. It could be a mural.
Yeah, but if she's a mural, yeah, then the bottom part of her is sticking out onto the sidewalk. So it's very strange. It's, you know, so it's kind of, it could be a mural. In that case, the braid would be against the door. But if you put the braid in front of the door, there is a piece of sidewalk underneath the image.
Okay, so we have 1 minute.
So it's a little bit of a contradiction there, and it's interesting that for me, actually. Yeah.
So, you know, this has been an interesting conversation about AI, and I think I'm going to do a couple more shows because I want artists to weigh in. So thank you so much for being willing to come back to Lehman College and tape with us and be on Corinne's Picks.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for coming to Corinne's Picks, and we'll continue to talk about artificial intelligence.